In this Baldur's Gate 3 Early Access guide, we're going to be talking about all the races in the game, what they do, and what they mean for your character creation. I'm also going to have a separate video that's dedicated just to the classes, as well as specific class videos, and an overall character creation video where we get into things like origin and background, as well as skills and abilities. So be sure to check out those videos if you need more help. First, let's take a look at the races that are included in the Early Access launch. These are Elf, Tiefling, Drow, Human, Githyanki, Dwarf, Half-Elf, and Halfling. We're actually missing 3 races from the 5th edition Player's Handbook, and these are Dragonborn, Half-Orc, and Gnome. I would assume that these are going to be added before the full launch of the game and may make their way into later stages of Early Access, but we have no confirmation of this at this time. Githyanki are actually not in the original 5th edition Handbook, and they were added with an expansion to D&D 5th edition, as were a number of other races with their expansions. There's actually almost 2 or 3 times the number of races possible. So it'll be really interesting to see how many of these make it into the game over, their duration of Early Access or before launch, or even after launch of the game. With those things said, let's take a look at the Elves first. Both High Elf and Wood Elf have the same racial feature in Keen Senses. This gives them proficiency in the perception skill. Perception allows you to see or hear things around you, to be aware of your surroundings. And proficiency, if you're not aware of what proficiency is, this is an added bonus to your rolls that you're going to gain in things that you're proficiency in. It starts at +2, so you're going to get 2 added onto your roll. And this number increases throughout the game as you hit certain character levels. So that number is going to go up. But at the beginning of the game, that's going to give you +2 on any perception checks, and that applies to both High Elf and Wood Elf. Taking a look at Fey Ancestry, magic can't put to sleep High Elves or Wood Elves, and they have advantage on saving throws against being charmed. So this means any effect that tries to make them charmed, whatever ability that targets, let's say it's Constitution or Intelligence or whatever, they get to roll the die twice. When you make a saving throw, you have to roll the die and hopefully save against the effect that's targeting you. When you have advantage, you get to roll 2 times and take the higher of the 2 values. So this is going to protect them very much against Charmed. And also, just to clarify what Charmed means in 5th edition D&D, Charmed does not work like DOS 2. It does not mean that character fights for you, becomes part of your team. In 5th edition, Charmed means that character will not attack you or use negative harmful effects against you specifically. And also you have advantage on rolls against them in social situations. So it will, if you became Charmed, then you wouldn't be able to resist someone as much. And if you charmed someone, they wouldn't be able to resist you much in social situations. Moving along, all elves are also going to get +2 to dexterity, that ability score, so that's nice. And they all gain proficiency in long swords, short swords, longbows, and short bows. Again, proficiency will add +2 to your attack rolls. Doesn't add it to your damage, only your attack rolls at the beginning of the game, and this number will increase throughout the course of the game. So this is going to make it more likely that you will hit the target with your weapon when using these weapon types, whether it's High Elf or Wood Elf. And also Dark Vision, and this allows them to see in the dark up to 12 meters. So in places that are not well lit, they're still going to be able to see what's going on around them a lot better than maybe some other races. Moving along to High Elf specifically, the first thing you're going to notice is that you gain a cantrip. This is basically an unlimited spell that you can cast as much as you want. If you didn't know, spells can only be cast usually a certain amount of times per day. This is not always the case, but it is in the majority of cases before you need to rest to replenish them. This is not the case with cantrips. They do not take up a spell slot, and they can be cast at will. There are 13 cantrips you can pick from when creating it at High Elf, so you'll have to look through them and decide which is the best for you. Additionally, High Elves have base racial speed, which means that they can move 9 meters per turn, which makes it so that they're more likely to get where they need to go in combat, which is great. And they also gain an additional intelligence point for their ability score. This makes High Elves particularly good wizards with a combination of cantrip and the extra intelligence. So if you like the wizard class, this is a very good class for this race. Wood Elves, on the other hand, gain Fleet of Foot, which actually increases their walking speed. So this means outside of combat, they're going to move more quickly. And this is great for, if you are trying to be a stealthy character or you need to move from point A to point B and not be detected. That's good for that. Additionally, they gain Mask of the Wild, which gives them proficiency in stealth. As we talked about, this gives them that +2 bonus at the beginning of the game on stealth checks when they're trying to remain hidden. And this is going to increase throughout the course of the game. And they also gain +1 Wisdom, which is good for spell casting on Druids, Rangers, and Clerics. So you're probably going to want to pick one of those 3 classes if you're making this build. As Druids aren't in Early Access already, this means you're probably going to want to play a Ranger or Cleric for this. And because of the stealthy nature of it, I'm going to say that it's probably better to play a Ranger for this. You don't have to, but it's probably skewed a little bit more towards the Ranger. Moving along to Tiefling, all Tieflings have Hellish Resistance, and this makes it so they take half damage from fire effects, which is really good at protecting them from that. They also have dark vision just like the elves do, so they can see things in the dark fairly well. The Asmodeus Tiefling also has base racial speed, which increases its movement per turn in combat. It has +1 intelligence and +2 to its charisma score. So this is going to be very good for a spellcasting type character. They also gain the Thaumaturgy cantrip, which makes them have advantage on intimidation and performance checks. So if you're somebody who likes to intimidate people or do some sort of performance, this is very, very good for you. The Mephistopheles Tiefling has the exact same bonuses, only it has the Mage Hand cantrip instead, which allows you to create a spectral hand that manipulates objects. You saw this demonstrated in one of the things that Sven did, showing off how the hand can do things. So if you'd rather have that than the other cantrip, then you would choose this one. The Zariel Tiefling is almost identical as the Asmodeus Tiefling, with the exception that the intelligence bonus is swapped for strength. It has the same cantrip, but otherwise, instead of +1 intelligence, you're getting +1 strength. This makes this a better racial choice if you're planning on making some sort of melee caster hybrid. This would be something like a paladin or a bard, or even if you wanted to make like a melee sorcerer or warlock, which you could do if you wanted, this would probably be a better race for that. Moving along to Drow, something interesting about Drow is that in the 5th edition handbook, Drow is actually a subrace of Elf, and they've made it its own race here with its own subraces. The Drow have base racial speed, which increases the distance they can move per turn while in combat. They also have Fey ancestry like the Elves, which makes it so that they have advantage on saving throws against being charmed and can't be put to sleep. They have +2 dexterity, they have +1 charisma, and they have proficiency with rapiers, short swords, hand crossbows, and superior dark vision, which allows them to see twice as far as those with regular dark vision in the dark. The Lolth-Sworn Drow also gain a cantrip that allows them to create a wisp that puts light in a 12-meter radius, so they're able to light up dark places with this cantrip. The Seldarine Drow also have the same exact bonuses, which leads me to believe that this decision is more about dialogue or potential impact of storyline events in the game, as why they distinguished it here. Because the Drow have +2 to dexterity, at +1 to charisma, and some decent proficiency, rapier, short sword, hand crossbow, they're probably going to make some sort of rogue-ish type character, potentially a character that maybe even uses a little bit of spell casting, but they're not going to be probably like a heavy frontlines character simply because they don't have any strength and no constitution here. When it comes to humans, there are no subraces within humans, but they do have base racial speed, which increases the distance they can move in combat, and they gain +1 to each ability score. So strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma each get +1 if you choose a human. I do want to note here that generally in 5th edition D&D, or any edition of D&D that I'm aware of, humans usually get a bonus feat. That is not the case here in Baldur's Gate 3. Moving along to Githyanki, they have base racial speed, which increases the distance they can move per turn in combat. They have +1 to intelligence, +2 to strength, and they have proficiency in light and medium armor, as well as short sword, long swords, and great swords. Proficiency in armor is a bit different than with weapons. If you don't meet the proficiency of the armor that you're wearing, some very, very bad things happen to you. I won't go into all the details here, but needless to say, you should be proficient with the armor you're wearing, or you will have catastrophic results. They also gain the cantrip Githyanki Psionics Mage Hand, which allows them to create a spectral hand that can manipulate and interact objects, kind of like the one we mentioned earlier. Because they have high strength, they make for a very good melee type class, as well as the proficiency in armors. So if you're looking for a good melee character, Githyanki is not a bad race for you. Dwarves have Dwarven Resilience, which gives them advantage on saving throws against poison, and they have resistance against poison damage. They gain +2 to Constitution, which increases the amount of hit points they have. They have Battle Axe proficiency, Hand Axe proficiency, Light Hammer proficiency, Warhammer proficiency, and Dark Vision, which allows them to see in the dark. The Gold Dwarf has Dwarven Toughness, which increases the hit points by 1 and increases it by 1 for every level they gain, so they're going to have higher hit points than regular dwarves or even most characters. They also have base racial speed of 7.5 meters. This is not quite as high as some of the other races, but it does increase it a little bit, so they're not moving quite as slow. They also gain +1 wisdom, which is great for druids, rangers, clerics. As we mentioned earlier, druids are not in the early access. So that means for this build, you're probably going to want to try, or for this race, you're probably going to want to make a ranger or a cleric. Because they have high constitution, I would probably opt a little towards the cleric side of things. The Shield Dwarf also has a base racial speed of 7.5, which is a little bit slower than some other races. It gains an additional +2 strength, which is great for melee, and also gains proficiency in light and medium armor. So if you're going to want to make a, character that's like upfront, hard hitting, like a fighter or something, this is probably the race or one of the races you would take. Half-elves are a combination of humans and elves, and they gain some bonuses from each race. You're also going to get to pick your subrace here, so you can be a high half-elf, a wood half-elf, or a drow half-elf, and it's going to give you different benefits depending on which subrace you choose. So all half-elves gain Fey ancestry, which makes it so they have advantage on saving throws against Charmed, and they can't be put to sleep by magic. They also gain Charisma +2, which is again good for spellcasters like bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks. But since bards and paladins aren't in early access, this is typically sorcerers and warlocks. And they have dark vision, so they can see in the dark. So all of the subclasses are going to have those things. In addition to the fact that they can spend 2 ability points however they want. The game is already recommended to you, but you can change them however you wish. The High Elf version of the subrace has a base racial speed of 9 meters, allowing it to move further. And again, you get to pick a cantrip from the list of cantrips, so that's that. The Wood Half-Elf gives you a base racial speed of 10.5 meters, which is one of the highest. It's higher than 9 meters, so it's going to move even further than some others, and has Mask of the Wild, which gives you proficiency in stealth, so you're going to be able to hide from people a lot easier, or enemies. And the Drow Half-Elf gives you a base racial speed of 9 meters and gives you the Dancing Lights cantrip, which allows you to light up an area with a wisp. So it doesn't really matter which one of these subraces you choose, but the general theme here is you're going to get an extra amount of charisma. So you're going to want to use one of the recommended classes for charisma, and for the early access, this is Sorcerer or Warlock. So you're probably going to play one of those 2 classes if you're playing this race in early access. And last but certainly not least, we have the Halflings. They have Lucky, which allows them to roll again anytime they basically roll a 1. So if you somehow fail really badly and roll a 1, you're going to get to roll again automatically, which is great. And they gain Dexterity +2. Dexterity is good for ranged weapons or some smaller reaching weapons, like a rogue or something like that. The Lightfoot Halfling gains Naturally Stealthy, making it proficient with stealth checks, being able to hide from people. And it has a racial speed of 7.5 meters, which is a bit slower than average, so they don't move quite as far as combat, and they gain +1 Charisma, which again is good for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks, and early access only has sorcerer and warlocks. But with the +2 dexterity and the fact that they're naturally stealthy, this is probably going to be a good candidate for a rogue-type character. The Strongheart Halfling gives them Strongheart Resilience, which gives them advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance to poison damage. This halves the damage that poison damage does. And again, advantage means they get to roll twice on poison saving throws and use the highest. Their base racial speed is 7.5, which is the same as the Lightfoot, but they have +1 Constitution instead of Wisdom. This is probably a better choice if you're going to be meleeing a lot more or in range to get hit, because you're going to gain more hit points. And unless you're really going to make a build that takes advantage of stealth and wisdom, this is probably a better bet for you. So there you have it. Those are the races in early access BG3. I expect more to be added. I probably expect more to be added with further expansions if they add expansions for the game. Wizards of the Coast is very, very much known for expansions, and so is D&D. So I cannot see Baldur's Gate 3 just being a standalone title like Divinity and Divinity Original Sin 2. I do think there are going to be future expansions to this game that add things like more races, but we'll see how much more they add throughout early access. The purpose of this video was to kind of extrapolate and show you what you might make with these races and why not you might take them. Obviously, for role-playing purposes, you can take whatever you want, and it isn't necessarily necessary to min-max everything, particularly on the easy or difficulties of the game. Baldur's Gate 3 does have a difficulty setting, but it will not have this setting in early access, so you only get to try this out against whatever the default setting for difficulty is during early access. Keep an eye out, because we're going to have other videos for classes going into classes and how they work, as well as overall class guides for each class going into some specifics. For those of you who just want the general overview, check out the classes video. And for those who want more in-depth information and discussion, check out each individual class video, as well as an overall character creation video we're going to be doing that's going to be discussing everything you can do in character creation. And also be sure to check out the Baldur's Gate 3 wiki. It's going to be filling up quickly. We have a lot of information there from the 5e handbook that we're going to be adjusting as necessary. Obviously, we didn't know what exactly from 5e was going to make it in, so this is going to be tweaked, and anything that is additional that was not, that's in 5e that's not in the game will be removed, and anything that's in the game that wasn't there will be added. So that'll get polished up. You can expect that to happen real quick.